Hello and welcome to the Fantasy Wildcard Dynasty show. I'll be your host this week. Ali, you can follow me on Twitter at FF Dynasty Grill. With me as always is my amazing co-host Kev, who you can follow on Twitter at Dynasty_GOAT. Kev, how are you doing this evening?
Good evening, gents. Feeling a bit strange. I'm sure we're all feeling a bit strange after last night's news. But yeah, just looking back at the weekend, it's been up and down fantasy-wise. There's been a couple of big performances that's helped me in some leagues, but hurt me in others, and we'll get onto that pretty quick on today's show. But in the main, doing all right, given the circumstances. Looking forward to catching up with you boys and having a few laughs tonight.
Yeah, good man. It's one of them instances where it doesn't matter what team you support. I think we all come together at a horrific time like this and just we all pray together. So we'll bring on our other amazing co-host Matt. You can follow on Twitter at MattFFDynasty. How you doing tonight, Matt?
Yeah, a little bit like Kev said, it's a bit of a surreal situation to be in at the moment. I think we're all a bit downbeat after what happened last night. But yeah, on the whole, on a personal level, obviously it's been great Christmas the past week or so. Just a bit of time away and stuff. Good to get back talking fantasy football and stuff. But yeah, like Kev mentioned, it's a bit of a tricky situation at the moment with what happened last night. But I'm sure we'll touch on it a little bit before we get on with today's show.
Yeah, so not very nice circumstances, and we'll not talk about fantasy for a few minutes, but obviously we'll talk about what happened last night. And Damar Hamlin, we're all praying that he pulls through. Done an amazing job, and seems like bringing him back, transport him to hospital. I mean, if something like that's going to happen, you're probably in one of the best places where there's so many medics on hand. It's not great, but hopefully he got the care that he needed in time. So yeah, just pass over to you boys. Obviously not very nice scenes to look at. There was some Muppets sharing stuff on social media today, but just a word about Hamlin and what happened. Come to you, Kev.
Yeah, so I guess first of all, my initial reaction when I saw the sleep notification this morning of game postponed, I thought, it must be due to some sort of weather issue. Obviously, not a weather issue that we know about, because Matt, the weatherman, he would have sorted us out. But I thought maybe something crazy like that had happened, or some power outage in the stadium, etc. But looking deep into it and seeing the sort of news surrounding Damar Hamlin and sort of the hit, etc. It put fantasy into the back seat. It made it insignificant. All the thoughts and prayers are with Hamlin's family, and just making sure that is what we're focused on at this time. We don't know what's going to happen with the game itself, whether it'll be played next week or whether it'll be played at all. So I guess it's a little bit up in the air what you do with your leagues. But like I said, it's probably not the time to be thinking about that right this moment. Just hoping we get some positive news on Hamlin first before any final decisions made.
Yeah, I just think it was tough. Obviously, us being from the UK, big into the football, it reminded me a lot of Christian Eriksen at the Euros and what happened there. Just seeing it happen again was heartbreaking, to be honest. Like Ali said, though, if you are going to be in any situation, being surrounded by all those amazing medics and people that can help you is probably the best situation to be in. But yeah, it was just a horrible thing to see, and I think it was just a bit of a reality check, to be honest. I mean, obviously, we all love this game. It's a game that we're all massive fans of, and we seem to think that these guys are like invincible. We know they're super athletic, superhuman, most of them, in how they play the game. And I think it was just a stark reminder, to be honest, that they are human at the end of the day. They're still really young as well. I mean, Hamlin, what's he, 24? Tegan's 23. They're kids, aren't they, basically, at the end of the day? And I think we forget that a lot of time when it comes to NFL, because it is such a tough physical sport. We as I say, we think they're superhuman, and it's just a bit of a reality check, to be honest, that these are human beings. And like you mentioned, Alice, some of the things I've seen on Twitter is shocking. People going at Tegan's for the hit and stuff. It's horrible. At the end of the day, they're playing the game that they love, the game that we love, and it's just one of those freak situations that's heartbreaking and puts a lot of things into perspective, I think, for us as well. And it's a shame it takes something as big as this to have that reality check. But just like Kev said, just hoping that we get that good news hopefully sooner rather than later with Hamlin, and he can make that full recovery. But yeah, it's just a real tough situation at the minute.
Yeah, still early days. We're obviously recording this on Tuesday, so it's still raw. News has been slowly coming out this evening about what the aim is going forward into week 18. But yeah, it's still really raw in our minds, so we're just reacting to it how we saw it this morning and last night. And it's just, we love the sport because it's that contact sport. We love the big hits and that. But I mean, just the last week or two, seeing the news about Tua and how he's still suffering from concussions, and there's even rumours that he's been told that he might have to retire eventually because of the trauma to his head and that. And it just puts in perspective, these are kids and they're playing such a dangerous game. And sometimes I think we get lost in the fantasy aspect. I know some of us have a lot of money at stake and you want to win your leagues, but really they're people, they're real people, and fantasy just goes completely out the window. So yeah, I think you boys covered it really well on what happened last night and the reaction. So I think we'll move on to tonight's show, and we're going to be recapping week 17 of the NFL season, highlighting players that stood out to us and discussing a couple of trades to establish their dynasty value, because we are a dynasty show. So these dynasty values are going to be important going into the off season. So Kev, we'll start with you, and we'll come to a wide receiver that I love, but a lot of fantasy players haven't loved him this season. So over to you, Kev.
Yeah, I thought you'd like this one. I thought it'd put a smile on your face for it being a Bucs wide receiver. And the first person that springs to mind when it comes to week 17 fantasy performance wise, it's Mike Evans, wide receiver 1 on the week, 48.7 fantasy points, 10 receptions, over 200 yards and 3 touchdowns. The highest scoring wide receiver performance on the year and second overall to the monster week that Joe Mixon had earlier on this season. I've got to say, last night's events did take my mind off Mike Evans. The fact that he put me way up in one of my finals, but also put me way down in another one with some crazy scores. I think he got over 74 points in a league that we're in together with the scoring for long touchdown receptions, which it was like I kept watching the same highlight and it kept just adding the points onto it over and over again. Just so crazy. But yeah, I think Mike Evans, he's the skeleton key to winning your title game. If you've got him on your team and you've not won, or you're not looking likely to win that game, please do share your team with us, because we'd like to have a good laugh and smile at the fact that you've got Evans and not managed to win your game. But yeah, just thinking that sort of bigger picture on Evans, wide receiver 11 on the year, wide receiver 15 in fantasy points per game. He's done it again. He's at 1,000 yards again. Situation, it's a little bit sketchy, I guess, because we're not sure what's going to happen with Brady. If he's going to continue, if he's going to be on a different team, etc. But we know the talent's there for Evans. He's getting on in age. Do I think he'll age well? Probably not, for the type of guy he is, but we saw it several times on Sunday. He's still burning past guys down the field and scoring touchdowns. So until we see sort of these type of plays drop and dip off as such, it's hard to say the end is coming close to his fantasy career based on what his output is. There's also uncertainty, I guess, with him being a free agent after after 2024. What will that look like? Where will it be? Will it be a different offense potentially with less weapons? I think having Godwin there helps because he's such a target over the middle. If he goes to an offense where he's the only guy, you'd like to think that maybe the defense would key on him and double, triple team, etc. might dampen his output. Keep trade cut have got him wide receiver 37, which, based on where it is now after the season, I'd say it's fair, because thinking of teams in your existing leagues going into next season, there's probably 3 or 4 teams that would find him appealing to have on the roster for the short term. He's not going to appeal into a lot of your rebuilding sides, or all of your rebuilding sides, and most of your retooling sides. So that ranking's fair. Personally, I still think you do want him on your win now sides. You're probably too late to pivot off him and get something decent. Why is he 37 value? It's probably 15, 20 spots lower than he was at the start of the season. So if you have played him through this season and not sold him, it's with the likelihood that you're just going to ride him into the sunset. So yeah, he's a guy that I'd still be comfortable having on my team, albeit a risky asset. And if he's on a rebuild or retooling side, then you've missed your boat.
Yeah, I'll be honest. When you said he finished wide receiver 11 on the year, I did not think he were anywhere near that. Probably the most under the radar wide receiver one finish that we've ever seen, because it just feels like he's just been missing for I know the last 6 or so weeks. I think he's only had one double digit week in those few weeks. I've seen a few people even mention on Twitter that they even sat him for this week. So I mean, you were mentioning about laughing at some people having him on the roster. Just imagine if you've got that sat on your bench, all those points. So yeah, it's been a real odd season, I'd say, for Evans. But yeah, the fact that he's still a wide receiver and still put up 1,000 yards, it just goes to show what he's capable of, to be honest. The fact that he does it year after year is testament to the talent that he's got. It's going to be interesting looking forward, like you mentioned, obviously Tom Brady, that situation at quarterback, how that's going to look. The fact that he's a free agent in 2024. So we know he's coming up to potentially moving teams. He'll be 31, I believe, in 2024. So getting up there in age. But I think, yeah, you nailed it, Kev, about the fact that he's ranked wide receiver 37. I'd potentially be looking to buy if I felt like I were going to be a contending team, because that does feel a little low, like you mentioned, dropped in value. Obviously, we know there's risk attached to these older wide receivers. We've seen that the drop-offs can be short when you get to a certain age. But yeah, I just think the production that we've seen, the fact that it's just year after year, you can rely on those 1,000 yards, even if it drops slightly, he's still a dependable wide receiver, targeted a lot in the red zone. He's got that upside in terms of touchdowns. So yeah, I still think now that potential value that is a potential buy if you're looking to contend in the next year or so.
Yeah, I'm obviously going to agree with that, being a Bucks fan. But I think there's potential for his value to drop even lower whilst we go through the playoffs and into the off season with the uncertainty if it carries on with who's going to be the Bucks quarterback next year. If it's not Tom Brady, if people are thinking it's going to be one of the backups they got at the minute, then I think his value is going to drop. So I think you can probably wait a little bit longer and pick him up even cheaper than that. Been incredibly disappointing. I can't believe he's wide receiver 11 on the year. I mean, the fact that when you took him, or he's probably at wide receiver 15 at the start of the season in terms of dynasty value, and he finishes wide receiver 11. I mean, you'd have taken that at the start of the season, but he's just been incredibly boom or bust, which is something that he's not been throughout his career. He's always been sort of catching about 10 touchdowns a season, gives you a couple of boom games, but also gives you quite a floor as well. So this year has been a bit of a shocker from Evans' point of view. Yeah, and I'm just really interested to see your boys' value on Mike Evans going forward. So we'll discuss that now in the trade scenarios. So Mike Evans, or another guy you can definitely label as boom bust, in Gabe Davis.
Yeah, I still think there's a bit of life in this old dog. I'm going to take Mike Evans. Gabe Davis generally being below consensus on him. I think potential is there, but he's not really done it from a fantasy perspective. So give me the Mike.
Agreed. I'll take Mike Evans as well. I think Gabe Davis. I think we're all below consensus on Gabe Davis this year, and I think we were right, to be honest. Looking back on this year, he's not lived up to the hype that everyone seemed to have given him. So yeah, I'll just take that guy that's 1,000 yards every year. I mean, Gabe Davis can only dream of those kind of numbers.
Gabe Davis has about 200 yards in one game and then about 200 yards in the next 10. So yeah, I'm taking the Mike Evans side. Gabe Davis has a few spots ahead of him on keep trade cut, so potentially a move that you can make, certainly if you're a contender, because Gabe Davis is just another one of those guys that is horrific to start and try and rely on for fantasy points. You always hope that it's going to be the week where he goes off and wins you that matchup, but he never seems to do it. So second trade scenario is Mike Evans or the 2023 203.
Yeah, I think this is interesting because it's going to mainly be dictated about where your team's at. If it's content, you're probably going to keep Evans. If you're not, you're going to take the 203. I think in a vacuum. So that's my way of saying it's a good effort. That Ali, well done.
Thanks, mate.
But in a vacuum, I'll probably lean Mike Evans just.
Yeah, I think Kev nailed it. It's probably right about the right value. I'd maybe say that Mike Evans is just that little bit more. I'd probably be happy to give maybe even a late first, like the 112 if I just won my league, thought I needed that wide receiver help, get a veteran in like that. I'd probably do that, to be honest. So I think, like I've said, in a vacuum, I'm leaning Mike Evans.
Yeah, like it. The third trade scenario is Mike Evans plus the 112 or Devonta Smith.
This is tough because obviously last show I was pumping the brakes a little bit on Devonta Smith. I thought that I had to balance it out when being an Eagles fan. On this trade though, Mike Evans and the 112, I see them both as risky assets as such. I feel that Devonta Smith is someone that, whilst I don't think his ceiling is going to be there, I think he's going to be really safe. He's young, he's proven to be a hit in over the last 2 years he's been in the league. So I'll lean a little bit safety on this one and take Smith.
Hate to agree with Kev on all three options. Yeah, sadly, I'm going to have to go with Devonta Smith. I quite liked him as a prospect when he came in, and I feel like this year I wasn't convinced when AJ Brown came in. I thought, oh God, this is potentially rough for Devonta Smith, but he's really impressed me this year, to be honest. I think Jalen Hurts taking that step's obviously been huge for that. So yeah, getting, like Kev mentioned, that younger asset, but at least you know what you've got with Devonta Smith. That 112, well, it could be amazing, it could be a flop. So it's just that little bit more certainty with Devonta Smith that makes me lean that side. Begrudgingly going with Kev.
Yeah, he's certainly been impressive the last sort of 5 or 6 weeks. Really upped his game, become almost 50-50 with AJ Brown, if not past him the last few weeks. And I think on Keep Trade Cut, I saw him as, I think he's like wide receiver 11 or 13. I think he's really getting up there now. So interesting rise in value for Smith there.
AJ Brown 3.0.
We'll get two more different players in terms of the way they look.
Yeah.
Inside joke.
We'll move on to Matt's pick, and a guy that I certainly doubted would produce this week with Jared Stidham at quarterback, but boy was I wrong. Over to you, Matt.
Yeah, going from one aging veteran wide receiver to another one, but I think we had to talk about Davante Adams. We just spoke about the guy that finished wide receiver 1 on the week, so I think we've got to follow up with the guy that finished wide receiver 2. 11 targets, 7 receptions, 153 yards, and 2 touchdowns this past week, which equaled 34.3 points. I mean, some idiot on Twitter was saying that, God, I feel sorry for anybody that's having to start Davante Adams this week. Obviously, Derek Carr, the news coming out that he wasn't going to play against Stidham. Yeah, that idiot was me that was that was feeling sorry for people that had Davante Adams playing this week. But to be honest, if you manage to get to a championships game and you add Davante Adams, you've done pretty well, because the past 2 weeks have been so rough with Davante Adams. So if you have made the playoffs, I mean, week 15, 6.8 points against New England. Week 16, 3.5 against the Steelers in that shocking game. So, I mean, if you have made it to the championship game with Davante Adams, then, yeah, you've obviously got a pretty stacked team all around. But, yeah, his Rapager this past week, as I said, finished wide receiver 2, and that means he finished wide receiver 3 on the year. So, overall, I think we can all say that it's been a really impressive season from Davante Adams. I think potentially you could even argue it's probably one of the best that he's had of his career in terms of what he's done with Derek Carr and the connection that they've obviously shown from being good friends. We know that Derek Carr was a big part of Davante Adams going over to the Raiders and joining those. So I think it's going to be interesting just looking to the future of Davante Adams, obviously with Derek Carr now looking pretty certain to be moved on from the Raiders this offseason. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how it plays out with Davante Adams. I wouldn't say that we're in a situation where Davante Adams is going to say, right, I'm not playing, I'm moving, I'm leaving because you've let my boy go. But at the same time, it is going to be interesting to see how it'll just play out at quarterback. And we know the Raiders are currently sitting at pick 8, so you could say they're in a situation where they can move up and get one of these rookie quarterbacks, or at least take a chance on one of the maybe the lesser quarterbacks if they maybe look to move back a little bit. But to be honest, I think this past week, as I say, it made me look a fool, but it's kind of showed us maybe we don't need to worry about who's playing quarterback with the Raiders and Davante Adams, because doing what he did this past week with Jared Stidham, it's shown that he's just that guy, isn't he, really? Davante Adams is that guy that can just get open. All you've got to do is throw it his way. I mean, we see every week it feels like these unreal catches. The one this past week, some saying, was it a catch? Wasn't it a catch? I think it was a catch, and to be honest, it was an unreal catch. That you see it every week with this guy. He is for me, he's one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, if not the best. So personally, I'm not too worried about the quarterback situation. Obviously, he's getting up there a little bit in age, but yeah, yet another unreal season from Davante Adams. So yeah, looking pretty good if you've got him on your team right now.
Yeah, I've just been thinking this past week, perhaps this Davante Adams has been carrying Aaron Rodgers his whole career. And actually Aaron Rodgers is not as good as we think. I mean, this year he's been struggling for form. So who knows? But yeah, that catch in the end zone was just unbelievable. When I saw it, I was like, wow, that's not a catch. But then obviously got his feet in, incredible stuff. And yeah, Jarrett Stidham looked, I mean, this was against the 49ers defense as well. That was number one overall defense, and just it picked them apart. It was really good to watch. And Matt, you're not alone. I was also someone that was advising people on start sit. Davante Adams, I wouldn't start him. It was a risky asset to start against this defense with Jarrett Stidham, but I was just watching him score point after point. 153 yards, and I was cringing a little bit. So I did trade for him, not this weekend, but the previous weekend. I traded for him and Miles Sanders, and they both put up gooses for me and knocked me out of the playoffs. So that was great. So yeah, with the mention of Miles Sanders, over to you, Kev.
Oh, thank you for that. I mean, first of all, I just want to thank Davante Adams for putting up a dud last week when I had that week 16 final that I won. Because if it had been this week, I'd been on the other side of it. So really appreciate that, Davante. I'll bump you up a couple of spots in my rankings. But just looking at his performances this year, he's had what, 3 wide receiver 1 overall weeks. He's had a wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3 a couple of times overall, which just shows how good he is. He's not dependent on the QB. He's QB proof. And I think this is what we have to really get into his head, that if you are an elite wide receiver, if you're an unreal talent, one of the best of the generation last 10, 15, 20 years, which Adams is, it doesn't matter who your QB is. Your QB proof. Whoever comes in, you're going to fire. It throws shade on people like DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, players like that if they get them a QB, they'll be good. I think they've got to do more to stand out and actually take that step themselves. Maybe they're never going to be elite or get to anywhere near that point if they're not QB proof as such. But that's a few shots fired at 2 guys I'm never really massive on. But yeah, a lot of question marks with who'll be the QB. Maybe the Raiders can get Aaron Rodgers. That would solve the problem that way. But yeah, that's just me connecting the dots. A little bit like Sam Alt did last year on our show when she predicted Adams to the Raiders before it even happened. So well done for that, Sam. But yeah, really interesting guy. I think we've got a few trades now to decide where we're at on him. So first of all, we've got Adams and the 107, or Tyreek and the 111.
Yeah, I think, to be honest, I view Adams and Tyreek pretty similar. I mean, we're talking Adams was wide receiver 3 this year, Tyreek wide receiver 2. We always think that Tyreek Hill's got that elite upside, but I think Davante Adams, maybe not for the same reasons. Obviously, didn't have that elite speed, but I just think his usage more in the red zone, the fact that he is that go up and get it kind of wide receiver, I think that kind of combats the difference in how they play the game. So basically for me, it's just a toss-up between which is the better pick, and obviously I'm going to lean with the 107 side over the 111. So yeah, Davante Adams for me.
Yeah, much like Matt said, I think it comes down to they're both in the same tier for me. Both of a similar age. I think Tyreek's got, if he loses his speed, then he loses a massive weapon of his game. I don't see Davante Adams never been that speed guy, and he's obviously shown his quarterback proof, so there's less worry about the future for him. So I'll just take that side with the better pick.
Fair dues. Trade 2, we've got Adams or Cooper Kupp.
Again, another tough one. I've never been super high on Kupp, but obviously what he's done the last couple of years, it's hard not to concede the fact that he is an elite wide receiver. I just do worry getting up there in age. There's an older prospect coming in, and the fact he's coming off a tough injury as well. I just feel that a little bit more safe taking that guy that's put up the numbers this year, really. So maybe you could say it's a bit of a recency bias, but yeah, I'm leaning Davante Adams on this one still.
Yeah, I'll just take the less risky prospect in Adams over Kupp, who's got the injury, and the Rams offense going forward next year could look pretty different.
Yeah, Both looking at new QBs potentially. Cup was outscoring Adams by 2.2 fantasy points, but there's a risk side as well that if he's not 100% Cooper Cup, if he's 90%, then yeah, it's basically a leveler. Third trade is Adams or Keenan Allen and the 208.
Tough one. Keenan Allen he's looked really good, to be honest, since he's come back and been a huge part of that offense. Again, I just worried maybe he doesn't quite have that ceiling. We know he's that PPR monster because he gets the targets, but just don't feel he quite has that ceiling. 208 is obviously a great level in terms of getting that dart throw, but again, I think I'm sticking with my boy. You know, I'm still going Devontae Adams, I think.
Yeah, I think I'm a massive Mike Williams fan. He's my guy, so I'm gonna stick my neck out and go for the Adams side here. I think Keenan Allen is great. He's been, I know up until a week or two ago, he was the most targeted wide receiver in the NFL since he came back. Been hyper targeted by Justin Herbert, but I think the targets are more shared around. Whereas Adams is always going to be that featured guy, so I'll take that side.
Super.
And with that, we've spoke about 2 Asian veterans. We're going to speak about another one now in my pick. We're gonna go for Najee Harris, the running back who Kev said we've not actually spoke about at all this year, and there's been a good reason for that, and the fact he's been pretty disappointing for fantasy. I know halfway through the season there was questions asked about could I trade him away? What's his value? No idea what his value is right now. I mean, it's been a really weird season for Najee Harris. The Pittsburgh offense has gone through a big change in the quarterback. The wide receivers look completely different this year. And I thought there was a big chance for Najee Harris with a rookie quarterback coming in to be absolutely hyper targeted where he was last year in a one game. I think he didn't have 19 targets in a game. Absolutely ridiculous. And this just dropped off. Like they just forgot that he can catch the ball and he's a PPR monster. But this week, I mean, he didn't have a massive week, RB9 on the week and up to RB14 on the season, which is a big rise from where he was, say, 6 weeks ago. Through weeks 1 to 10, he was the RB25, which is where a lot of the questions came from about why is he struggling so much? Is it the offensive line? Is it the offense in total? Or has he just lost a step? But then since then, he's come back. Weeks 11 to 17 is the RB7. So he's back to where he was last year. And they finally started targeting him again. I mean, it's only the last couple of weeks, but I think he's had about 15 targets the last couple of weeks. It's quite high. And the Pittsburgh Steelers seem to be winning games now as well when they've been featuring Najee. And now he's rushing more on the ground as well. They've won 5 out of the last 6, and they seem to be going in the right direction. Najee Harris seems to be going in the right direction, and his value's creeped up slightly on keep trade cut. He's now the RB14, which I mean is really low considering where he started the season. He was actually the RB2 on keep trade cut, and this was on the 11th of September, so the right start of the season. Najee Harris was the RB2. I think it's based on what he's done in the last year or two. But yeah, I mean, looking at his value right now, he's priced. This is on keep trade cut, so it's not the best thing to depend on. But he's priced just below a late 23 first in value on keep trade cut, which I think with recency bias, I think you're still going to have to pay up a bit if you wanted to get Najee Harris on your team. But if there's still people with doubts that don't like this offense, that think he might have missed a step, I'd be biting at that price in pretty much any scenario. Whether you're a rebuilding team, obviously. I don't go and buy running back stuff if I'm a rebuilding team. But if you're going to get value that way, if you're going to get Najee Harris for a late 23 first or less, then I'd be biting at that with whatever team I've got, especially if you're a contender, if you can offer a late first, if you've maybe made the final or won it this year. If I can offer a late 23 first, maybe a little bit on top of that, then I'd be happy to pay that for Najee, who I think has still got a really bright future. I think he's 24 years old. Yeah, I think he looked great the last year. This year had his struggles, but I think he's still a good candidate to go out and buy in Dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, this is the guy that was running back 3 overall last season in fantasy. We know that he's not a great runner, an elusive runner. He's not someone that's going to create yards on his own, so he is very situation dependent from a rushing point of view. He's had a lot less rushing yards this season than last season, but similar touchdown numbers, similar yards per carry. The big hit has been the targets, and take that 19 catch game out, and that is a big reason as to why. But just looking at the numbers, 40 receptions this year, he had 74 last season. That's 34 fantasy points. That's 2 a game if you've got your 17 games. So that's why he's running back 14, 15 on the year. The big question is, moving forward, will he be used in the pass game as he has been recently, as he was last year, compared to other seasons? If the answer is yes, you can be more positive on him. If it's not, then he's pointless, really. You need to just pivot off him to a cheaper guy, because that production's replaceable. He's going to be a volatile asset as a 2 down or 2 down and a bit back on an offense that is up and down. We've got to see how that all comes together with Pickett and Pickens and etc., how it's all going to match. There's plenty of good weapons on the offense, Johnson, Freiermuth. So it's a tough one. I feel that where he's ranked, sort of running back 14, that's not an area I really want to get involved and get fishing. I feel you've got to be aiming high or fading position, especially with all the injuries we've had at running back as well.
Yeah, I'm going to start by saying I absolutely love Najee Harris, but not really from the fantasy side. Just as a person, I think he's absolutely brilliant. I know, Kev, we've had some discussions when he came in as a rookie. You weren't super keen on him, but I just think he's brilliant, to be honest. I think, yeah, it's a lot of fun. But we're here to talk fantasy, so that's all irrelevant. So, yeah, I think it is in a really interesting situation. Like Ali mentioned, it's been a down year, but Kev, you made the great points as well, that those targets that they're so valuable in terms of fantasy, and especially from that running back position. You've only got to look at guys like Austin Eckler, who's absolutely killing it this year. It's because he is so heavily used in that passing game. And Najee had plenty of that last year. Now this year, we pick it at quarterback and the chops and changes. It's just not really played out. It's been a bit of a rough one for him. I think those changes at quarterbacks, obviously starting with Trubisky, Pickett coming in, then back to Trubisky. It's been a bit of a mess. Not really a solid year to build that connection with a rookie quarterback. So I'm still holding out hope. I think long term, I think he is still a rock solid running back in terms of fantasy. I do think he can be used in the receiving game. It's just been one of those years when you get that raw rookie quarterback coming in and just how it develops that first year. We know it can be a big leap for quarterbacks, and in turn that then rubs off on the other positions. We've seen it with guys like Deontay Johnson, obviously having a rough year this year as well. So I still do have hope just in terms of the talent. It was my RB1 when he came in as a prospect last year. So I think the talent's there. It's just another year, maybe another year of rebuilding that offensive line. We know it's been rough the last 2 years, but even last year it's not been a great O-line. This year again, they've obviously struggled. So I'm hoping, I'm holding out hope that they can make those address those needs on the O-line. But yeah, I think long term, I still think he's a solid running back. And Ali, you mentioned about getting him as a late first. I think if you're on the clock in your rookie drafts, I think you could move off that late first and get a Najee Harris. So that's probably a move I'd wait if one of these rookie running backs falls to that position. Get that guy that you may be a little bit more comfortable in knowing what you've got in Najee Harris. So yeah, if I were looking to trade from him, I'd probably wait until these rookie drafts come around. But let's see where you guys are in terms of trades now and what moves you'd look to make. So we'll start off with just a simple one: Najee Harris or J.K. Dobbins.
Yeah, Dobbins has been catching some fire lately. He's been fine on his return to the Ravens. Looked really good on the ground, but non-existent in the passing game. So in terms of my PPR leagues that I'm playing, I'll take Harris just for that upside. I think there's more upside in Harris's game than there is for Dobbins. I think Dobbins is someone that is very talented, but he can be replaceable on that offense. I think when Gus Edwards comes in, he looks great as well. So I'll go for Harris.
Yeah, Dobbins is catching fire, but he's not catching passes, is he? So give me Harris on that one. I think he's got that contract for the next 2 or 3 years if you take up the option. Dobbins, I think it's after this season, after next season, it's up. Yeah, if he was in a more pass-friendly situation, I'd probably lean Dobbins because he's more talented in my eyes. But give me the pass catching of Najee La Cucaracha.
What a guy! Yeah, right. So you mentioned you want a pass catching running back. So let me try again. Then it's Najee Harris plus the 206 or Saquon Barkley.
Yeah, you'll probably like the answer here, Matt. I'll go Saquon Barkley just for that upside. He is maybe the best running back in the NFL. struggled of late, but was brilliant at the start of the season and in the middle. Someone that I still rank in the top 5, that's got tremendous upside, has the ability to finish as the RB1 come next season. I think he's about to get paid big time. So I'll lean Barkley.
Yeah, if I can pivot up from Harris and get top 10 like Barkley, smashing.
Right, you mentioned pivot up, so let's see if we can pivot down maybe off Najee Harris. So Najee Harris, or a guy that's caught fire a little bit lately, Cam Akers plus the 210.
Yeah, it's a really difficult one, this, because obviously Akers has come from absolutely nowhere. I mean, they tried to trade him. They didn't get any trade partners. No one wanted to trade for Akers. Looked like he was just left on the sidelines, and suddenly he's come in and just looked absolutely dominant, apart from a simple catch he should have made this week where he would have had a massive touchdown run. But I'm going to go for the Harris side. I think that there's more scope for Harris to bounce back and be a top 10 running back. Whereas with Akers, I think there's a lot of uncertainty next year with the whole offense. I'm not sure he's the guy. I just think that the Rams are pretty much in tank mode at the minute. They've got eliminated a few weeks ago from the playoffs. Don't know what that offense or the whole organization is going to look like going forward with the head coach, with the quarterback. So I'll just take Harris.
Yeah, if you listened to last week's show, I was throwing a bit of praise on Akers. I think, like I said, I've been the highest on him. I've not lost hope on him either. It's not take lot, but I'll take Akers and the second round pick. You've split us, Matt. I feel
Finally.
a bit dirty.
Finally, ninth trade one in, and we finally got a split.
But yeah, I just think Akers, we've seen glimpses that he's getting back to what I thought it was like earlier this season. He looked like Najee Harris, and now he looks like Cam Akers of old. So just a shame we didn't catch that pass, but never mind.
Interesting. I've still got a couple of Akers shares. I might have to offer them up to a few people. Yeah. We'll move on to Kev's pick now, and another guy where his future's looking maybe uncertain or maybe not. We'll get some clarity hopefully this off season. So over to you, Kev.
Yeah, I'm making this a really inclusive show. Obviously, I had Mike Evans to begin for you, Ali. And I thought I'd keep it on the Giants theme with Matt as well and talk about Danny Dimes, Daniel Jones. He stood out to me this week, mainly because I had Saquon Barkley on two title games, and he was the one stealing the touchdowns. So not ideal, but he was the QB2 on the week, 36.18 fantasy points, 4 total touchdowns, 2 passing, 2 rushing. The best output of his career. Now, this next stat, you might want to sit down, grab a glass of water, take a few breaths. I'm going to reveal a stat to you. Daniel Jones, QB6 on the year, QB8 in fantasy points per game. Bit of a shocker to me as well. I think just looking at the season as a whole, he has been up and down. It's the rushing output that's getting him to where he is. But you've got to think, this new offense, Brian Dable, he was in Buffalo. Have a little think about that for a sec. Giants are 9-6-1. They're going to the playoffs for the first time in, I don't know how many years. Maybe Matt can clarify for you in a little bit. Give him a bit of chance to Google. But I think he's going to be a free agent after this season, and there's no way the Giants can let him go. I expect a short-term deal, but you can't be getting rid of a QB that's taking you to the playoffs without giving him one more shot or just a chance to grow even further. We've seen how much he's grown this season. Over his career, his turnovers have decreased every season. So I think there is positivity from that point of view. What is his ceiling, really? It's pretty decent because of the rush upside, but he's not got it as a pass for me. To really climb up into that top 5, top 6, but that's not where he is. He's QB50 in a keep trade cut. I think looking at his weapons that's been around him, there's potential for the wide receivers to grow and get better. Tight end, Bellinger's promising as well. Saquon, hopefully you'd like to think they re-sign. So there is a lot of positivity in Daniel Jones. I think it's something where maybe 4-6 weeks ago, it's kind of a bit of a laugh, a bit of a joke that Daniel Jones is the next Josh Allen, which he's not, by the way. He's definitely not the next Josh Allen, but there is signs that it could be somewhere in between, maybe closer to Trevor Lawrence range in time. Maybe not. We'll have to see what the other two think.
And everybody laughed when we said that Brian Daboll could turn Daniel Jones into the next Josh Allen. And look where we're at. He's getting there. So no, to be honest, Kev, I'm with you. I've been super unsure on Daniel Jones ever since we drafted him, to be honest. I think that when we picked him, it was a bit of a surprise to me. I've been rooting for the guy I want him to succeed, but I mean, the last 3 years have been tough. And then this past year, to start the year, I still wasn't there, to be honest, on Daniel Jones, but he has kind of won me over. I think these last, like you mentioned, Kev, maybe 6 or so weeks, he's starting to look like a solid quarterback. But I think that's the issue when talking about the Giants and the long-term future for the Giants. He is just that. He's a solid guy. He's a solid quarterback, but he's not that franchise quarterback that everyone seeks and needs to make strides and go for the Super Bowl. So that is just my concern. There's obviously a big question mark this offseason on what happens with Daniel Jones. Do we re-sign him? I hope that he kind of repays the favour in the fact that we've kept faith in him and maybe gives us that team-friendly, cheaper deal and sticks around for a year or two and let's see what happens if we can surround him with some more weapons, because like you mentioned, he's basically had nobody to throw to. I mean, Kenny Golladay, who thought that Kenny Golladay was going to succeed on the Giants? Because I certainly didn't. I would never think such a thing. But it's just been an absolute mess in terms of the wide receivers. We've had that little glimmer of hope. Hodgins even this year as well at wide receivers looks really good the last few weeks. Like you mentioned, Kev Bellinger taking steps forward. So I feel like the potential is there for Daniel Jones if we can give him some weapons. Like you mentioned, that rushing upside's there as well in terms of fantasy. So I'm hoping we can keep him on that team-friendly deal, a short contract. Give us that little bit of stability in terms of fantasy as well with a contract with the Giants. But beyond that, I mean, who's looking for a Daniel Jones? Is anybody out there looking for a Daniel Jones in the NFL? Because I don't think there's going to be many teams calling for him, to be honest. So I'm hopeful that we can keep him for a couple of years and let's see what happens.
Yeah, I think you have to give him a bit of credit, to be fair, with the receiving weapons that he's got around him and he's had all season. It's been pretty shocking, to be honest, when Darius Slayton is probably your best wide receiver, Richie James, as you mentioned, Hodgins. I mean, it's not a great cast of wide receivers, and the fact that he's got Saquon Barkley there, but I mean, the defenders are just going to load the box up and stop Saquon from getting through. So I think you have to give him credit. I think Brian Daboll has done a brilliant job. And keep Trey Cut, the quarterback 15. I think the Giants, as you both mentioned, I think they've cornered, or they've got themselves in a corner where they're going to have to pay Daniel Jones. I mean, what's the chances that they let him go? Who are you going to get in through the door that's going to do a better job than what Daniel Jones has done this season? There's not many quarterbacks that's going to be on the market unless you go really big. So I think that the fact that if they do pay him, maybe like a 2 or 3 year contract, quarterback 15, I think there's a little bit of value there in the fact that if he's still in his, say, quarterback 6, with that Russian floor, the fact that they're surely going to upgrade at wide receiver at some point, I think that his floor is probably quarterback 15 in this offense with Brian Daboll. So there could be a little bit of value in that. Obviously, it's a risk with not knowing what's going to happen at the end of the season, but I think Daniel Jones is someone that you could take a chance on right now. If he's your quarterback 2 in your Superflex league or even quarterback 3 in one of your teams, then you're laughing with the floor that he brings. So we'll judge his trade value right now. I think we might know where we're going to go with this first one, but Daniel Jones or Geno Smith?
Yeah, I think if I'm trying to win a Super Bowl real life, Geno Smith's someone you can probably fit in more systems and try and win a title with everything around him. But yeah, fantasy-wise, rush upside, the unknown, I guess, is enticing. So give me Daniel Jones.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Giants fan. I'm going to be biased and say Daniel Jones. I think I'm hoping we do sign him for another year or so and get that out of him. And like I mentioned, just that unknown. If we can get some weapons around him this year, then yeah, there's that potential of an even higher ceiling than what we're seeing.
I think it's an interesting one with Geno Smith looking pretty good this year. The fact that a few weeks ago they were saying they're almost destined to re-sign him. The fact they've got the weapons there, I think he's an interesting player going forward. But trade 2, Daniel Jones or this year's 201.
Yeah, Daniel Jones again for me. I think 201, there's going to be some interesting prospects at running back, QB, probably, Project QB, that could be Daniel Jones in time. Maybe so. Yeah, Daniel Jones, baby.
Yeah, it's just an uncertainty in it with that 201. There's potential you could maybe get one of these raw quarterbacks in the upcoming NFL draft, but I'd rather just take that little bit more certainty. If we know how valuable quarterbacks are in Superflex, so it's just a bit of a risk for me to take that 201. So I'll side with Daniel Jones.
All right, let's see if we can get with this third one. So Daniel Jones and the 109 or Trey Lance.
Ooh, so I'm going to take Daniel Jones and the 23 first on this one. I think it's a pivot I would make as a Lance owner with a bit of uncertainty about how that team's going to play out with Brock Purdy. So yeah, give me that pivot down to Daniel Jones.
Do you know what? I'm going to go against Kev. I'm going to do it. I'm going to go for Trey Lance. I feel I'm still enticed by what Trey Lance could be. I know there's obviously risk attached coming off the injury, but I mean, if we're talking ceilings and what you can get from quarterbacks, Trey Lance is up there with the best. And even in this upcoming class, you could argue that Trey Lance's ceiling is as high, maybe if not higher, with that rushing upside. Obviously, it's been a rough ride to start with Trey Lance, but I'm going to gamble. I think it's feeling the gambling mood, so I'm going to take Trey Lance.
Love it, Matt. That is the correct answer. And we'll
I'm going to clip that.
We'll swiftly move on to your pick, Matt. And it's a rookie tight end that's obviously you want to talk about a tight end, but it's a rookie tight end that's caught fire lately.
Yeah, you know, we always like to talk about these tight ends. I absolutely love him. And it's got to be Trey McBride or Trey McBay, as I've seen some people label him recently. Yeah, we finally got that big breakout game from him. 10 targets, 7 receptions, 78 yards, and that touchdown. Finished tight end 2 on the week. So obviously fantastic if you've got Trey McBride. I'd imagine you probably didn't start him because it hasn't been too great in the opportunities he's had. But he's seen the targets. He's actually had 5+ targets per game since the Zach Ertz injury in week 10. If you just compare that to the season average amongst all the other tight ends, that I put him right at 7th in terms of targets for tight ends. So there's hopes there in terms of getting those looks. We know how valuable targets and opportunity is when it comes to the tight end position, just because it is such a rough position in fantasy. But the problem is, even with those targets, we've yet to really see that production until this past week. Now, I will say we know with tight ends, these rookie tight ends, they do take time to develop. So I've never really been panicking on Trey McBride. It's been great to finally see that big game though this past week. Looking forward, we know Zach Ertz looks like he's coming back next year, but also coming off that tough injury, he's going to be 33 next year as well. So I feel like we could maybe starting to see that change of the guard and Trey McBride coming in. Now, if just looking at the offense, we know there's solid weapons here with Hopkins, Hollywood Brown, Rondale Moore as well at wide receiver. But just looking at what Zach Ertz did when he was on the field before the injury, he was averaging over 7.5 targets per game. So it's not like the Titans don't see the targets. And while Kev, I know you're probably a massive fan of Zach Ertz, I wouldn't say he's an elite tight end. So the fact that he's getting those looks from Kyler Murray when he was playing, I think that's got to be a bit of a positive in the future and maybe Murray targeting the tight end position. So I'm hopeful for Trey McBride. Hopefully Cliff Kingsbury finally leaves the Cardinals, because that has just been a mess in terms of what he's doing over there. So I'm hopeful maybe a new offensive scheme and get Trey McBride, as I say, taking over the reins at tight end. And yeah, I'm still pretty hopeful. He was my clear tight end 1 in this class. I think he was everyone, to be honest, because I think he's a really solid talent. So yeah, I'll be looking to still now buy Trey McBride in Dynasty.
Yeah, me too. I was taking Trey McBride in, say, the middle to the back end of the second round in the rookie drafts last season, with the hope of stashing him away, knowing that he's going to be behind Ertz year 1, certainly, with hopes to get more looks going into next year. I did actually start Trey McBride in. He was in all my DFS teams this week, and he was the only player that done anything. So that was a good pick, but the rest of them weren't. Yeah, certainly the hope for me is that he takes over from Zach Ertz going forward. I think Zach Ertz it was the tight end 2 or the tight end 3 when he got injured. I think he was doing really well, and I spoke about him on a show just before he got injured. So there's hopes for Trey McBride, and certainly in this offense. I think we all hope that Cliff Kingsbury gets his marching orders at the end of the season. I can't see any way that he stays in his job after the disaster that he's had this season. And with Kyler Murray as well, I think Trey McBride is someone that is still under the radar that you can probably still trade for. I know you shouldn't really trade for low tight end targets, but if you're giving up quite a low draft pick, it wouldn't be a too low draft pick, but if you're giving up not too much value or an older prospect, and say you're rebuilding, perhaps you give up a Zach Ertz or someone and you get Trey McBride in a deal back. That's something that you can still look to do before he pops off and gets a bigger chance, maybe next season.
Zach Ertz is pretty decent, He's had top six tight end seasons over his career. He's been all right, but we're not talking about him. Trey McBride. I think, first of all, we expect rookie tight ends to have slow seasons, so it's not been a shock that he's really picked it up in the second half. Not only his snaps, but his targets, etc. That has coincided with injuries to guys like Ertz, like Hopkins, like Marquise Brown. But yeah, it was my tight end one rookie coming into the season. There's nothing to really change that in my eyes. A lot of uncertainty with the offense, with the coaching, how it will look. If you think he can be someone that can be in your lineups next year, he's worth going after. But I just feel like I want to see a little bit more before I'd go after him. I think young tight ends, it's a tricky one on rosters where it's not tight end premium or two tight ends, because you're essentially leaving a roster spot to carry someone until they're ready to form. I think taxi squad this year is fine. Or if you're in a pretty substantial rebuild, maybe a 2-year rebuild, it's okay in being on that. I think if you're a contending team, especially, I personally would pivot from McBride to someone else. But maybe there's pivot in our trades. We've got trade number 1, Trey McBride, and the 210 or Dalton Schultz.
Yeah, this is one of those, and if you're a contender, you're probably leaning Schultz on what he's done this past year. But if you're a rebuilder or a retool, you're probably mainly leaning more to McBride. So one of those in a vacuum. I'm still going to go Trey McBride and the 210. I believe in the talent long term. So just based on that, I'm going to go for Trey McBride.
Yeah, I'll lean that side. It wouldn't feel great to give up Schultz, who I know Kev, you absolutely love Dalton Schultz. And I've got quite a bit of Schultz as well. I still think the upside is there for Schultz, but I would probably make that move and try and get a little bit more, but I'd still do it for a late second as well.
Yeah, I think if Schultz were re-signed in Dallas, I'm taking that side. I think as it stands, McBride on the pick. Trade 2, playing the heartstrings, McBride or Cole Kmet.
Interesting one. Kmet's obviously looked pretty good the last few weeks or the second half of the year, but I do just worry, is it because he's the only guy left standing in Chicago with Justin Fields? And I mean, Justin Fields I don't think he's ever going to be one of these super heavy passers. We know he's got that rushing upside. So with that, I think I just feel like that the Bears are going to make more moves to improve the wide receivers and the weapons there. So I'm going to lean with Trey McBride. Yeah,
it pains me to say it, but Kmet's done. He's not done. He's not done too much apart from catch touchdowns this season. So with the thinking that they're going to bring in some wide receivers next year, I'll take McBride for the potential upside.
Yeah, McBride and Kmet are the same age as well. That was an interesting one. Trade 3, you've got McBride or Bellinger in the 301.
Trying to tug at the heartstrings here, Kev. Again, I'm still going to side with Trey McBride. Bellinger, while he has looked great, it's a little bit like Kmet. We've not got a great deal going on at wide receiver with the Giants. I just worry with a little bit stronger competition. Does he take a little bit more of a backseat? If maybe it was a mid-second or an earlier second, I'd probably lean that side. But I just think with it only being the 301, I'm going to stick with Trey McBride on this one.
Yeah, I think McBride's got more upside, so I'll stick with that side. And with that, we'll move on to another rookie that's maybe got potentially some upside. Who knows? We'll go to my pick, and it's Tyler Algier. We're finishing with an absolute superstar. Is not really, but he's been the RB12 on the week and an RB31 on the season. So if you just look at it from that stat point of view, not been amazing, but the fact that he's not always had the starting role. And just lately, he's looked really good as an RB1. He had his season high in carries this week, and in 20, which has been creeping up the last few weeks. His snap share has been going up. He's been outpacing Cordarrelle Patterson. And since the bye week, the Falcons had a really late bye. So the last 3 games, he's actually been the RB7 at 18.3 points per game. So it's been really good from Tyler Algier, and this Falcons offense is obviously eliminated from the playoffs. So whether they're just looking at the youth, who knows? But we know with Arthur Smith, the coach, has an extremely run heavy approach where even if they're down in games, they just seem to, we'll call another run play. We'll slowly get back in the game rather than just turn to the quarterback and say, pass your way out of trouble. They still continue to pound it on the ground. They've had a pretty decent offensive line, and I think they're concentrating on building that up. So I do think that there's a role going forward for Algier. I think he's been pretty exciting. I know he's been in a couple of my fantasy teams that are doing really well and helped me to a championship. You then look at longer term. Cordarrelle Patterson's going to be soon to be 32 years old, so we don't know how much longer he's going to have in the NFL. He's not looked as good or as explosive as he did last season. He's out of contract after this season as well, so there's certainly room for Algier to increase in the role. And with the Falcons, there's plenty of holes on the roster. So even if you look at the draft and say, well, are they going to replace him with a high draft pick at running back? Well, probably not likely to touch running back, to be honest. They've got Algier, Patterson, who they could keep on the roster. They've got Hundley, who they drafted in 2021, who's had a bit of a role. So I don't think they're going to touch running back. So I do think that there's room for Algier to grow on this roster. I think Arthur Smith seems pretty safe as a coach heading into next season, to continue that heavy running back style. And just looked at the ranking, he's actually ranked below David Montgomery on Keep Trade Cut. So at RB30, so that would be a move that I would look to pivot off Montgomery if you can to Algier, who I think's got a brighter future.
Yeah, I mean, Algier, 2-down guy on a bad team. He's got maybe 19 catches on the season, I think. Look, him at 19 out of 20 targets, which is pretty good efficiency. But I guess where he's ranked, I want to be adding someone there that's got the pass game upside based on the rankings. So he's not someone I'm totally thrilled about. I think, yeah, there is plenty of holes on that roster, but we know this is an awesome rookie class. We know it's an awesome free agent class as well. So I would still be worried as an Algier owner that they could bring in someone to take away the pass game work, or potentially, even if it's a late day 2 pick, they're going to gazump him and take his job. So, yeah, not super high on Tyler. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, we maybe should have guessed that Tyler Joe was going to have a good year. We know Arthur Smith, just looking back to Tennessee, and obviously leaning on a guy like Derrick Henry. And while I'm not saying that Algier is anywhere near what Derrick Henry is, he is that bigger back in this offense. And we know that Arthur Smith was always going to run the ball. And even when the chasing games, he still seems to want to run the ball plenty. So he's in that great situation in terms of the rushing. But I think, like Kev said, he's not really seen that upside in the receiving game again. Did we ever see Derrick Henry have that receiving upside? No, not really. So we should probably expect that. But he is going to get that usage on the ground. So he's at least getting somewhat of an opportunity to get you those fantasy points. Like I've mentioned now, I think they could even bring in a day 3 running back, to be honest, and it's still going to be some level of competition. I mean, Algier was a day 3 pick himself. So I do just worry that maybe Arthur Smith looks for, maybe there's that just new shiny toy that he sees in the draft. So yeah, I do have concerns long term, but let's see where you are in terms of trades, Algier or Pacheco.
Yeah, I'll stick with my boy Algier. I was pretty high in pre-draft, and I kept that faith with him in post-draft. So I'll keep that. Pacheco, I do like what I see from Pacheco, but what McKinnon's been doing has been amazing and taken away from Pacheco. So I'll go Algier. Yeah,
give it Pacheco because of Andy Reid.
Right, Algier in the 208 or Damian Pierce?
This is definitely a tough one, but I'll stick with Algier in 208. But it is close because Pierce was amazing start of the season.
Yeah, I'll take Pierce because I think if you've got Pierce, you can get one asset that's better than those two. You can maybe get like an early second, something like that.
And the last one, Algier in the 204 or Zeke and the 112?
I'll take Zeke in the 112 just to move up slightly in the draft. But it is, again, yeah, that's a close one.
Third time lucky.
So with that brings us to the end of the show where we've reviewed week 17 of the NFL season. So thank you for tuning in. Sure to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and on YouTube at Fantasy Wildcard. Join us every Tuesday for the podcast and every Wednesday for the stream of the show. Thank you once again. Have a good one, and we'll see you again.